Good morning, Dowling Catholic grandparents and students. My name is Joe Cordero. I'm a 1967 graduate of Dowling High School, and I am pleased to be invited to talk to our grandparents and our students on this Grandparents' Day. To understand where I'm coming from, you need to really understand my history. I was a son of George Cordero, who's the athletic director and teacher at Dowling High School. During that time, he began teaching in 1955. And I can tell you that that's the day I started my relationship with Dowling Catholic High School. When I was in first grade, my father would take me to football practice with him. And we would sit around and watch that going on, and all the people, as little kids do, didn't fully understand what was going on. I mean, football was still new to me. But I experienced the love and affection that the coaches and the teachers paid to their kids. As I grew up, this began to blossom. Eventually, in middle school, I would go more and more times. We'd go to all the Dowling games, basketball, and we'd go to football games, and certainly baseball, because that's my dad's was a baseball coach. And we got grow into the spirit of Dowling Catholic. My time came in 1963 when I went to Dowling as a freshman, and I graduated in 67. Through that time, that growth and appreciation for Catholic education, and then now appreciation for my parents for giving me that opportunity, because I knew that really didn't happen for everybody. After I graduated, I went to Loras College for a couple years, and a tragic thing happened in 1969, and my father died way too young. He died when he was 46. He was athletic director at the time, and it was a very sad day in our lives. And it was obviously a sad day in our family. But, we push on and we do the things we have to do. During that time, I've had an opportunity to teach in Catholic schools for 40, and to be an administrator for 47 years. 30 of those years were at St. Anthony's, where I was the principal at St. Anthony's School. But for 12 of those years, I was a coach and teacher at Dowling High School. And the people and the relationships I built there are still with me today, and they will continue to be for a lifetime. So I'm connected. I'm connected. I mean, as an Italian kid on the South Side, when you say you're connected, that's a big thing. So I really appreciate all that time together. But I want to talk to you today about grandparenting, and it has a lot to do with my history. My grandparents, on my dad's side, Catherine and Joe Cordero, and that tells you I was named after him, were very special people. I can't tell you much about my grandfather, Joe Cordero, because he passed away at age 52 in 1948, and I was born in 1949. So I can't tell you a lot, but I hear a lot of stories, and the stories are always so good of what a generous man he was, and how he took care of his kids. But most of my relationship with that side of the family was with my grandmother, Catherine Rand Cordero. Now, when you hear the word Rand on the South Side, you know right away I'm related to almost everybody, and you live in that neighborhood. You live in the South Side, and you're a Rand, or you're related to a Rand, or married a Rand, then you've got a special place to be, because we're all cousins. So when you go down the street and say, "Hi, cuz," you got it. That was a special lady. She lived alone after her as a widow for many, many years. And she was the one who had a car. She used to drive us everywhere. When we'd ride our bikes down to the Columbus Park, she would come by, pick us up, put our bikes away so we didn't have to ride up the hill, Southwest 9th. She's just a caring and loving person. Now, on my mom's side, my grandfather, and my grandmother both lived to be in their late 70s. But I really appreciated both of them because, that was the only grandfather that I had that I could know, because he was still alive, and my grandmother was the chief of the house. Both of them came from Italy. They were both immigrants, came through West Virginia and landed in Des Moines, Iowa, and they had a truck farm. Now, a truck farm is a small 22-acre farm where you grew vegetables and fruits and vegetables and so on. And you took them and you sold them out of a truck. And you would do that by loading up your truck in the morning, going to all these little grocery stores all over the city. Now, it's hard to believe that we had all those little grocery stores. This is way before Hy-Vee, way before Safeway or Fairway or anything else. And it was just how neighborhoods grew up. And I'm sure if you ask your grandparents, they'll recognize that. But I get to really know my grandfather Sposetto. His name was Frank. Frank Sposetto, and the custom in our family was you name your oldest son after your father's dad, and then you name your second son, if you get one, after your wife's dad. So it was Joe Cordero and Frank Sposetto. My brother Frank went to Dowling. Obviously, he was a football player. He was an all-state football player, and he's now into the Dowling Hall of Fame. We're very proud of that. But my grandfather, a special guy. Neither one of my grandparents could speak very good English. If you listen real hard, you can get it. Or you'd have to ask Mom, what did he say? What did she say? And that was a different process of communicating. But you knew there was love in the house. You knew that anytime you came into the home. My grandfather, though, he was a rough guy. I mean, sometimes he'd just scare you. And he would smoke that pipe, and he'd have that pipe in his mouth all the time, and it'd be, he'd have one of these lift like this where he just kind of set it in there. And what a character. What a character. I was blessed one summer to drive his truck. And he had to drive, he'd fill it up in the morning, and he'd have to drive it and take it to all these stores. I had to do that for the summer. Not because I enjoyed it, not because I wanted to, is because my grandfather was in jail during that time. He had traffic tickets, and they finally said to him, Frank, you got to stop at stop signs. You got to. And he just always say, I just to slow down. That's what I do all the time. Well, they finally caught him again, and so they put him in day jail. Now, I'm not sure what they call it, but they released him. It was a release program so he could work on his farm and continue to make a living. But he couldn't drive. No driving. So I was 16 years old. I was the oldest grandchild that lived close enough to do this every day. I'd pick him up in his truck at 7 o'clock in the morning and from jail. And then we'd go pick up the vegetables and stuff at the farm. Then we'd go down to Court Avenue. Now, that days, Court Avenue was a big warehouse of goods, farm goods, fruits, vegetables. Everything you wanted was down there. And so we'd go there, and then we'd start our journey. We would hit 75 of these little stores. Now, I got to tell you, when you watch somebody work that kind of job, they build relationships. They build relationships solid because he knew every owner of every store. They were black, they were white, they were Jewish, they were Hispanic, they were Polish. They were coming from all over the world because that was the thing almost everybody could understand. People needed food. And he'd barter with these people. They'd argue. And then he'd say, let's go, get in the truck, we're leaving. And the guy said, wait, and then we'd have more bartering. But in his life, as rough as I always thought he was very kind-hearted. And that he made some special deals with some of the grocers he knew were having a difficult time. But that taught me a lot. You don't just go into Grandpa and Grandma's house and say hello and go out and say, I know them. You don't know them until you work with them a little bit and you take some time to be with them. Or go on vacation, go on spring break with your grandparents. Ask my grandkids about going on spring break with their grandparents. So it's an experience. But that was the grandparents I grew up with. And fortunately for me, my wife, Rose, I'm an Italian descendant. She's Lebanese descendant. So we have very different cultures, but we have a culture and ethnic background that celebrated aging people, grandparents. And our kids grew up in that kind of a world where you always appreciate the people who went before you. I've got 5 grandkids and 2 daughters and 5 grandkids. Both of my daughters attended Dowling Catholic. One of the oldest Gigi Filer, was graduating in 91, and my daughter Mitzi Nevitt graduated in 93. Gigi's 2 kids, Jackson and Josie, both played sports for Dowling, and now are playing. Josie's playing basketball for the University of Northern Iowa, or University of Nebraska in Omaha, and Jackson's playing football for Iowa Western Community College. Their benefit, Dowling, was tremendous, and I'm very proud of both of my kids, and I'm also proud of my 3 younger ones, because they come from Mitzi's family, and it's Jake Nevitt. He's a junior. Luke Nevitt, he's an 8th grader at St. Anthony's, and Frank is a 6th grader at St. Anthony's. Now, when you talk generations, all 5 of my grandkids were at St. Anthony's when I was principal, so they got to know me real well. And one thing they didn't want to come into or ever have to be called to is the office. But sometimes I would mess with them a little bit, and I'd try to scare them a little bit, and I'd bring them down for nothing. And there's many times during all school assemblies, they'll tell you that I embarrassed them. I'm telling them I taught you how to be a good Christian and accepting of old people. I'm not sure I sold that very well. But anyway, the 5 grandkids at St. Anthony's, they're a 5th generation. My grandmother, Catherine Rand, went to St. Anthony's, so they were 5th generation at St. Anthony's, now they're going to be 4th generation at Dowling, and they are. The last 2 will be going as well. So that's my family. That's my grandkids, and what I could say is, being a grandfather, and my wife will say the same thing, and being a grandmother. Wow, I just didn't know how I got there. I mean, how do you go up and thinking you're going to have 5 grandkids, and here's what's going to happen to them, and here's where they're going? How does that happen? And that happens, and without things happening. I didn't learn to be a grandparent, because one, my grandfather, I mentioned to you, Joe, died before I was born. My father died very young. I was still in college. He's never met my wife or any of my grandkids, or my kids or my grandkids. He's never met me, so I didn't have that good model. But I had my wife's father, Mike Corey. What a gentle, loving person he is. And we didn't talk a lot, but he modeled to me what a grandfather should be, because he was a great grandfather for my 2 daughters. And so with models and people you might admire and like the way you could tell if they're good grandparents or parents by the way their kids act. In this day of world, with the crises going one after another, with the COVID going on, when kids can't go visit grandpa or grandma, or where they can't get out or go on a car ride with anybody, it's really pretty sad. It's very sad that we have to go through this, but they'll get strong. Whatever you just pray. We as grandparents, we're going to do all right, and I think our grandkids worry about us sometimes, because all they hear on TV is that if your grandparents get this, you bring this home to you could be bringing this disease home to your grandparents, and they'll die. Well, goodness gracious, how does that make you feel as a kid who's might be just 1st, 2nd grade, 3rd grade? It's got to be hard on them. And they are concerned. Anyway, I've had a blessed life. I've had a blessing of kids and grandkids and son-in-laws. I have 2 of the greatest son-in-laws anybody could ever ask for. And right now I'm just happy as a lark. I'm retired, but I had a good life. I enjoy my kids very much. I hug them as much as I can, and they hug me, and they know that that's important. It's important that we hug and make contact, and we always say goodbye. And most of all, we always say, I love you. I love you. Thank you for letting me share my time with you. Please take care of yourselves, stay well, and give your kids, your grandkids, your kids, give them a hug and tell them you love them. That's the important thing. God bless you. And thanks again for inviting me to this Grandparents' Day. God bless.